11. I am here to talk you through a paper 1 question 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to read an extract and then talk about answering a language focused question. So pretty much very similar to what we did before last week, but different paper. So I'm going to try and share my screen with you, and we'll see how it all goes. Just bear with me for a second. Oh, there it is. Dun, 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 dun. And desktop. And not that one. Not that one. Not that one. That one. Hopefully you can all see that. So it says your task, and there's some prompts on the side. Help sheet, paper 1, question 2. How does the writer use language here to describe the speaker's thoughts on Princeton College? Now this is the sort of thing that reading widely will help you with, because if you didn't know, Princeton College is an American university. It's also a very posh American university, so like the American equivalent of Oxford or Cambridge in the UK. So here we go. Let's read it. What did I think of Princeton? Well, the answer to that question requires a story. When I first arrived, I looked around me at the Gothic buildings, younger, I later learned, than many of the mosques of this city, but made through acid treatment and ingenious stonemasonry to look older, and thought, this is a dream come true. Princeton inspired in me the feeling that my life was a film in which I was the star and everything was possible. I have access to this beautiful campus, I thought, to professors who are titans in their fields and fellow students who are philosopher kings in the making. I was, I must admit, overly generous in my initial assumptions about the standard of the student body. They were almost all intelligent, and many were brilliant, but whereas I was one of only 2 Pakistanis in my entering class, 2 from a population of over 100 million souls, mind you, the Americans faced much less daunting odds in the selection process. 1,000 of your compatriots were enrolled, 500 times as many, even though your country's population was only twice that of mine. As a result, the non-Americans among us tended, on average, to do better than the Americans. And in any case, I reached my senior year without having received a single B. Okay, so first things first. As we kind of said before, like the examiner isn't looking for you identifying a rhetorical question. You might have seen one straight away, but you won't actually get many marks or any marks at all just for going through a piece of writing and going, oh, right, that's a verb, that's a rhetorical question, that's a metaphor, because that's not what the question's asking. The question's asking how the writer uses language, okay? So we're going back to this fit thing. So what does this make you feel about what the speaker's thinking? What does it make you imagine might have result? How has the speaker got into this position where they've got those attitudes? And also, further kind of inferences based on that. If we're aiming for higher marks, then the best way of going about that is simply to look for extra interpretation. So we're using that word alternatively again, yeah? If we can identify features, yeah, go for it. That's cool. But, you can actually get full marks on this question without identifying a single language feature if you use the right sort of terminology. So let's go back to fit. Let's think overall. What does this piece of writing make us think about the writer's thoughts on Princeton College? Okay, so there are some prompts on the side there. I don't know if you want to pause, or I'll read them out slowly, and you can use them yourselves to come to your own conclusions. So we got what does the phrase younger I later learned suggest about appearance and first impressions? What does the verb inspired suggest? The metaphor of my life was a film is positive, but what is the deeper meaning? Consider appearance versus reality. And then we're down to paragraph 2. There's a contrast on the student body, all and many. And look at the staggering description of numbers attending based on white and non-white. What is the first word that comes to mind? Ooh, just lost my PowerPoint. There it is again. You will have to work hard to read between the lines of this extract. Consider the idea of discrimination. Okay. So I'd suggest to you to have a look through first. So pause the video, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some of the prompts on the right hand side of the screen to talk about language, but also other things that occur to me on the way. Before we actually look at the prompts, right? Just thinking overall, what do we think the writer is thinking about Princeton College? Is it positive, or is it negative, or is it something a bit more subtle than that? And the thing that strikes me overall is, firstly, there's this sort of sense that it doesn't quite feel real. He talks about the way it looks at the start, doesn't he? When I first arrived, I looked around me at the Gothic building. So I'm going to highlight that looked. I looked around me at the Gothic buildings. Younger, I later learned that many of them are the city, but made through acid treatment and ingenious stimuli to look older. So again, there's that looking rather than being appearance. I thought this is a dream come true, okay? And it inspired in me the feeling that my life was a film. All right, okay. That's interesting, isn't it? So I'm looking at looked and dream, and my life was a film, and immediately, on the surface at least, the key thing that's striking me is he thinks that there's something false or misleading about the impressions made by this place. Now, whether that's a good thing, so let's think about feelings, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is another thing entirely. There's lots of things that seem quite positive in that. He says he feels like he was the star of a film, and he says this was a dream come true. So maybe there's two sides to this. Going down to the second paragraph, if the first paragraph seems to be about appearances being deceptive, the second paragraph seems to be more about facts. I mean, even sort of looking at this from a distance, we can see statistics straight away. Can we see I was only one of 2 Pakistanis, and there was 2 from a population of over 100 million souls. 500 times there, 1,000. So he's clearly sort of talking about, or he's trying to suggest that he's talking about the actual facts of this place. So if the first thing was, right, this place looks like this, it seems like this, what's the reality of being at Princeton? What is this college actually like? And there's obviously, you can see this mention of Americans, non-Americans down here, and Pakistanis here. So there's this sort of sense of maybe discrimination. So we might have picked that up already. It's hinted at in the first paragraph quite subtly, where he talks about the mosques actually being older than the university, which is interesting, isn't it? I mean, it's that's this kind of perception, I suppose, that mosques must be something to do with an immigrant population, so they can't possibly be older than this famous university, but in fact they are. So that already sets up this idea that perhaps there's something unpleasant going on here that he's reminding us of. He's waking us up to something. Okay, so I'm just going to go through some of these prompts. Hopefully you have come up with some of your same ideas. So what the phrase younger I later yearn. So yeah, this goes back to this idea of appearance and reality. So you arrive at Princeton, and Gothic is a kind of medieval style of building originally. Yeah, so these buildings are kind of, they're supposed to look like something from like the 12th century or something like that. Yeah. However, we happen to know that America is only what, a few hundred years old. Independence at the end of the 18th century. So immediately that's wrong, and it actually turns out that the mosques are older than that. Okay, so it's projecting one thing and it's being another. The verb inspired. Okay, what does the verb inspired suggest? So Princeton inspired in me the feeling. Okay, inspiration again is usually used positively, isn't it? If we're inspired with something, it fills us. It literally means to breathe in. It gives us energy. It fills us full of life. But here it's kind of suggesting perhaps that it's going past reasonable thought and it's going into his imagination. So again, this is prompting ideas in his imagination, but it's not necessarily true. And again, if we look at prompt 3, it says the metaphor of my life as a film. Being a film star sounds great, doesn't it? But again, this adds to this idea of unreality. A film isn't real. And going to Princeton University in a way should be like the realest thing that's happening to you. I mean, it's a really elite place that not many people get into. And yeah, in many ways, even if you get into Princeton, you've probably got it made. If you write that on your CV, then you're going to get amazing jobs, earn lots of money, be rich and powerful, etc., etc. Number 4, the contrast in the description in paragraph 2 focuses on the student body. Look at the words almost all and many. Okay. So they were almost all intelligent. That's clever, isn't it? So that he's chosen that word almost. And again, there's that thing that he's doing all the way through. Is he's saying something positive and then qualifying it or undermining it subtly. So they were almost all intelligent. If they were almost all intelligent, that was that suggest about some of the people that were in one of the best universities in the world? Yeah, that they weren't. That there are some people there that probably don't deserve to be there. And if they didn't get there because they were intelligent, why did they get there? Was it because they were rich? So these questions are occurring to me. Was it because they were powerful, or was it, as he seems to be suggesting, it might be because they're part of the kind of majority white population? Okay. So look at the staggering description of numbers attending based on white and not. Yeah. So again, yeah, 2. So Pakistan's one of the biggest countries in the world, and there's 2 Pakistani students there. Yeah. So there is this massive contrast between well, he says 1,000 Americans were there, and only 2 Pakistani students. So I don't know. What word comes to your mind? Unfairness, discrimination, or perhaps you might want to argue it's not as harsh as that. Perhaps it's just the lack of awareness of what you can have because of where you were born. Yeah. The last section sort of talks about reading between lines, and I think we've kind of covered that. I think it would be easy to read all of this with thinking that this was kind of like snide or sarcastic, but he does. If you look at that last sentence where he talks about, in my case, I reached my senior year without having received a single B grade. He's actually saying that he's although he's been confronted with this unfairness, this discrimination, and possibly prejudice, he hasn't, or she hasn't, doesn't say whether it was a man. They haven't let it determine their future. So he's actually done really well, maybe because of the discrimination. Okay. So I'd suggest that you have a look over it yourself. See if there are any other angles that you can come across. So think about the words that they're choosing, and how they fit into this idea of unreality and discrimination. Okay, thank you very much. Let's stop recording.